Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer 5010-458-652. This is a plain bearing 5-knuckle, full mortise, wide throw, steel-based hinge, 4.5 by 8, with a removable pin, satin chrome finish. Let's dissect that part number. 5010. That's going to mean a number of things. First of all, it'll mean it's a full mortise hinge. You can see from the swag on the hinge leaves there that when they're brought parallel, they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame. It also means it's a 5-knuckle plain bearing hinge. So 5 knuckles, no ball bearings, just what we would call a plain bearing hinge. It also means that it is a wide throw hinge. And we'll get to that in a moment. Also means it's steel-based. The hinge is made of steel. Okay. It means finally that it is a standard weight hinge, and that would mean 134 thousandths leaf thickness on this hinge. That's considered standard weight for this. Now the next part of the part number ties in with the 1 in the 5010 part of the part number. That means it's a wide throw hinge. 458 means it's 4.5 inches tall and 8-inch wide on a hinge on all full mortise hinges. The height is the first value. You would never call this an 8 by 4.5. It is specifically a 4.5 by 8. So the height is the first value. It's the opposite of how doors are sized. And using that sort of convention allows us to properly define a hinge. So it's the height and then the width. The 652 means two things. As we revealed earlier, it's made of steel. But the 652 not only means steel base, but it means that it's satin chrome base hinge. Okay. Now, the hinge is available in several different architectural finishes, all the chromes, the brasses, the bronze, black Japan, zinc, prime coat, etc., etc. Is sold as each. Is, again, plain bearing and 5-knuckle, full mortise, wide throw hinge, okay, with a standard non-rising removable pin. There is a link below this video to the cut sheet, and that cut sheet shows everything important dimensionally about this hinge and all of Bommer's sister hinges in terms of wide throw. But interestingly enough, other than the location of all the screw holes, okay, and every other dimension we've not covered, there is a chart in the lower left-hand corner which gives you kind of like the roadmap by which to call out different variations of this hinge. So in that column of steel hinges, that's the base material, you can see that you've got a 5,000, and that's a non-wide throw hinge. That would be a 4.5 by 4.5 or a 4 by 4. Would be or a 4.5 by 4 as well. That would be a non-wide throw hinge. When you go to a 5010, you can see from that chart, now you're dealing with wide throw hinges. Hinges that are wider than they are tall. If you get to the 8000 and the 8010, those are the same hinges compared to the 5000 except they're 3-knuckle. Then you get into the BB versions of both the 5000 and the 8000, and that is simply a ball bearing. Okay. Next column over, the only number that is changed is the last 0 turns into a 1. That means that the hinge is either brass or bronze based, depending on the finish. So if you ordered a polished brass hinge, it would be, let's say, a ball bearing, a BB 5011-458-605. That would give you a polished brass hinge with a solid brass base material. Then finally, the next column over, that number changes to a 2, and that means everything is stainless steel, which you'll get in either a polished stainless or a more typical satin stainless steel hinge. Now, where you're going to use a hinge like this is in an application by which you need to get the door out and around an unusual wall condition, unusually thick casing, or some sort of an application where the door is set in deeper into the frame. You could have a condition that you might have the first floor of a 100-plus-year-old home, and those walls are incredibly thick, and those doors might be set in deep into the frame. You know, when you stand on the pull side of a door and you run your hand over the face of the door in the frame, you'll notice that the door is typically inset a slight amount. 3/32 of an inch, something very small. It's not flush. Well, what if you took that dimension and made it 1 inch or 2 inch or even greater? That would be a condition by which you'd have a wide throw hinge. Or you could have an exterior door that swung out, and you might have shutters applied to the face of the wall. Okay, you would, and in that scenario, you want the door to get not only out to 90 degrees, but to get out and past and around the shutter so that it closed off or opened up against parallel to the face of the door. Or in the case of this specific order for this specific hinge, there's a client who has an in-swinging door, and what he has is a baseboard mounted heating unit. Typical baseboard mount heat would be an application by which you could possibly use a wide throw hinge. And in some of those instances, you might need to consider a sister product to wide throw hinges, which would be a full lip strike plate. A couple of those applications would call for it. Okay, so this is a significantly wider hinge than standard. 4.5 by 4.5, or 4.5 by 4, or 4 by 4. This hinge is going to be able to allow you to get out and around in much greater sort of wall condition. It's up close to the largest hinge that's going to be readily available from Bommer. 5 by 8 is a typical size for the largest hinge that you're going to get. So this is pretty close. 4.5 tall is going to be appropriate for 1 3/4 doors. That's the bottom line. Anything thinner than that, the problem is the spacing of the screw holes is too wide, okay, based on where you have to install the hinge to be appropriate for a thinner door than that. So those are some common applications for a wide throw hinge. Okay. The last thing I'd like to point out to you, other than screws are included, I should have mentioned that, this is going to come with all wood screws and all machine screws for each hinge, which is nice. The final thing would be the Bommer logo, and right above it it says Made in USA, a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. If you have any questions on the Bommer 5010-458-652 full mortise satin chrome 5-knuckle plain bearing wide throw hinge, or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us.